did it in one take?
Huh?
Man, Larry's a pro.
Larry did it in one take.
One CD.
The following podcast contains language and content that may not be appropriate for all listeners. Discretion is advised.
When you were growing up, what was some advice your dad gave you?
Well, that's the problem. But my dad left when I was 4.
Yeah, the only advice I got from my dad was to be still and take this ass whooping like a man.
He used to show me what fork to use, like the crab fork, and we had all these like instruments of silverware out on the table. It took me a while to get the hang of that.
Oh, did my dad give me any advice? No, but he led by example of what not to do.
What fork do you use for salad?
It's the third one from the right.
My dad never gave me any advice.
I think he did, but I don't recall.
Did your dad ever give you any advice?
Mm-mm. My dad was gone by the time I was 2 and dead by the time I was 12.
Told me to go to school, stay in college.
Did you listen to him?
I did not listen.
Did your dad ever give you any advice?
Yep, he said smoke only on the weekends.
You're now tuned in to San Quentin's Ear Hustle from PRX's Radiotopia. I'm Earlonne Woods. I'm incarcerated here at San Quentin State Prison in California.
I'm Nigel Poor, a visual artist who volunteers at the prison.
And together, we're going to take you inside. Today on the podcast, we're going to hear about being a dad from prison.
E, did your dad give you any good advice?
What do you mean, when I was like growing up?
Yeah.
Not that I can recall, but when I went to prison, he did say, watch your back.
Was that helpful?
I mean, it was cool coming from him, you know?
I guess it showed that he cared, right?
Pretty much.
Okay, well, being a parent is a lot more than giving advice. But if you're in prison, it's hard to even do that because you're in prison.
Yeah, but you can actually give advice and be a dad from prison. It's harder, but a lot of guys here have children, and there's all sorts of different ways that they do it. And that's what we're going to hear about today.
And mainly, we're going to focus on this guy here.
So when I was told I was going to be a father, I started to think about what type of father did I plan on being.
Derrick Holloway has been incarcerated for 21 years. When his son was born, Derrick was a 24-year-old drug dealer and had a lot on his mind.
I can't be a father like this in my current condition and living the way that I was living. I really need to change.
But needing to change and actually changing your life, Derrick now knows, are two different things.
You know, I'm at the hospital with his mom, and seeing his face was like, wow. It was like a miracle. It was like, man, this a human being, I'm responsible for a human being. And so, man, what came with that was a whole lot of emotions. A whole lot that I wasn't even really prepared for or had even the emotional intelligence to even deal with it. And I just didn't know how to say, this child is what's most important. I just didn't have the tools.
In spite of being a new dad, he didn't change.
I started getting sucked into the criminal lifestyle, criminal thinking, criminal behavior. After that, it was off to the dogs.
So give me a typical day. Like, what was you got up, and then how did the day unfold?
So I would get up, and of course I would, have girlfriends strolled all over the city. So depending on what girlfriend house I was at, so I would get up and kind of call around, see where everybody was doing, where everybody was going to be at. And I would, hit the freeway, get to this block where everybody was at, kick back, see what was going on. So the typical day really was like me really making sure that the spot where we was at had dope out there. People were out there, they were ready, the spot was rolling. And so I would kick it there for a minute, but I would always be trying to run and see what the next woman, what she was doing. Yeah, I just love women.
Derrick was living a life. He was young, he had money, women. He thought he was on top of it all.
So the downfall was beginning really to use drugs.
And then he really got in trouble. In 1997, less than a year after his son was born, Derrick was arrested for first-degree murder and sentenced to 37 years to life.
The next time Derrick saw his son, he was in prison behind thick glass in a visiting room.
So he came to visit on his first birthday, and I'm just looking at him. And some of my thoughts was this glass going to represent our relationship? And for the first time, I was realizing and thinking, like, man, there's a possibility that I may never get an opportunity to see him as a child, man, grow up and have some kind of influence in his life.
Come on, somebody can do better than that. Let's give the Lord a hand clap of praise.
Left to my own self, I couldn't find a way out. I wanted to do something different, but I didn't know how. And coming to prison actually really gave me that opportunity to sit down and really examine my life and to begin to get the courage and to do something different with my life.
Feeling good. I feel God. I feel God in here. I feel deliverance in here. I feel a breakthrough in this place. Whenever you talk about the...
In prison, Derrick got religion, and he's now a prison preacher with a full-on congregation.
So if he put himself in prison, what prison are you talking about, Lord? He said, I went all the way down to hell, and I pulled the captives out, and I set them free. I did something that you can't do. Yes, you can get...
A lot of guys get religion, fake religion, act religious, but Derrick's not bullshitting. He's like the real deal.
How do you know?
Because you could sit in one of his sermons and he'll just have a tear or two in your eyes, you know?
Really?
I mean, and he walked the walk. He don't just walk the walk on the pulpit, he walked the walk on the yard. And he go around and counsels people, counsels the youth. So, yeah, he's real.
But he couldn't counsel his own son. When his son's mother died, the boy's maternal grandmother took him in, and she thought it was best to keep him away from his father. And Derrick only heard what was going on second and third hand.
So when he was growing up, I heard good things early on, you know, him being in church, and I would send him Bibles, and him playing football, and, you know, him going to different schools, academies. And then I started hearing different things about him being, you know, in the street life and going hard. And I was really disappointed. And even hearing that made me feel grief and pain. And
so he was basically growing up like you were.
Yeah, he was growing up like I was.
Derrick was soon going to get a second chance to parent his son, and we're going to hear about that in a minute. But first, here's another prison dad with a very different experience of parenting from prison.
I could have been a dad at 17 and been just absolutely happy and dedicated, and I think I could have been a good pop, you know, as a kid. So it was something I wanted, and I was excited, confident, hopeful, and fulfilled.
John was 35 when his first child was born. When he committed the crime that led him to prison, his kids were 3, 8, and 9 years old.
It happened so suddenly. It was the night of December 20th, and I was coming back from a Christmas party, and it was one of those drinking and driving fatality cases. So I didn't have time to think, well, what would happen if I were taken away from my kids? That thought never occurred to me. It was just utterly, chillingly sudden. From the very beginning, being separated from them was the most gut-wrenching part of it. Besides, of course, what had happened, that 2 young, innocent lives were taken because of what I had done. I tried to be open with them about my responsibility. I tried to get them tuned into that, you know, not to thinking of me as a victim. And I think that made them a little more receptive to our parent-child relationship.
After John was arrested, he never went home again. He was a lawyer, middle class, but he couldn't make the $750,000 bail. The family life that he knew and loved was just gone.
But John was all about being a dad, and now he had to figure out how to do it from prison. not easy.
I remember they came regularly in county jail when I was there, but of course you couldn't hug them there. It was through the glass.
After county jail, he got his sentence and was sent to a maximum security prison in Southern California. In that prison, his family could visit without glass between them.
I'll never, as long as I live, forget the visiting room at Lancaster. And I spied them across the room, and Remy, that my daughter, just ran towards me. And, just the feeling of hugging her, and then the boys joined me then, and I had my arms around all three of them. It might be the most emotional moment that I've ever experienced. There were so many hard parts about being away from the kids, but the biggest part was that I was so limited in how I could carry out what I still so fervently wanted to do, as far as being a good dad to them. For the longest time, when they were small, I would write one letter a day and alternate amongst the three of them. Of course, each of them would be receiving a letter every 3 days. I remember with my daughter Remy, she was the youngest, she was little, and I started a series of poems called the Silly Sally poems, and she got a real kick. She'd say, Dad, when are you gonna, I want some more Silly Sally. So I kept writing, and finally she got to be about 8 or 9 years old, and she was a little bit too old for that. But she talks about those still.
John's kids are all grown up now. They all went to college. The oldest is now 30. And if you're wondering what happened to their mother, she and John are still married.
I mean, I'll be very frank. It was much more important and much harder, staying the meaningful father. I felt a much more biting, acute loss of the children than I did my wife, rightly or wrongly.
I didn't get a chance to really speak to him at 12 or 13 or get pictures or send stuff to him and just kind of communicate with him. I didn't get any of those things.
Back to Derrick, who hadn't heard directly from his son in years.
The time that I heard that my son was even thinking about me is when he was in jail. So I get on the phone with my sister, and she says, I got something to tell you. Derrick should be there like tomorrow. Derrick should be there tomorrow. He called right before he left the county jail and said that I'm on my way to San Quentin.
Derrick's son, who he hadn't seen in about 20 years, is coming to his prison. What are the chances?
Well, you don't see it a lot, but I've met a few guys who are locked up with relatives. But father and son, that's an entirely different level of weirdness.
I told a couple of my friends, I was like, man, my son is here. And so I went out that night to see if I can get just a glimpse of him.
So when his son first came to San Quentin, he went to reception, which is basically orientation. And those guys there don't wear blue. They're in the orange jumpsuits.
And I'm looking at every guy in orange as they're walking by. I'm kind of measuring their height because I hadn't seen him since he was like 11 months old. And so I'm like measuring the height, like, okay, looking at the walk, the bill. I'm just looking at all these different things and these people trying to identify my son.
So you had no clue what he looked like?
I had no clue.
You never had any pictures?
I mean, I had one picture, but he's 20 years old now, and you're trying to see like what does I think his last picture I got when he was like 6 years old. Like, so from 6 years old to 20, like what has changed in all of those years?
He kind of walked in. I noticed him from the picture, even though it was old. I noticed him, and then he just came up and just gave me a hug and just started crying, breaking down.
That's Derrick Jr. He's serving 5 years for robbery.
So when I looked at him and I just saw the love in his eyes, so kind of felt the connection right there. That's like, it's different. You talk to a lot of people, but you never actually feel that connection till you sitting there with your dad. You never met him at all, and then you finally just sitting there eye to eye.
They saw themselves in each other, father and son, but really, they were strangers. All they had between them was some DNA and this old memory.
First memory of my dad I had was probably going to the jail and seeing the glass in the mirror and seeing somebody behind it. That's all I remember.
So he's talking, and I'm looking at him, and I'm in between our conversations of, you know, what has he been doing, you know, how is his girlfriend, how is my granddaughter, all of these different things, how's his grandmother, asking him all these questions. In between those things was this reality setting in that I'm in prison with my son, and I'm trying not to let that affect me as I speak with him. But the reality of it just kept hitting me. I'm in the cell with my son.
So there they are, father and son, reuniting in a fucked up place. I mean, prison is not set up for family life, that's for sure.
For Derrick Sr., he had to figure out how to be a dad to his son in a way that he had never been able to do on the outside.
How am I supposed to show up now? Like, am I supposed to be like his partner? You know, am I supposed to be like dad? Am I supposed to be like my father? Like, what am I supposed to do? And it was so uncomfortable, but it was a good uncomfortableness. And it was like that kind of uncomfortableness, like when I walk away, like, I can't wait to be uncomfortable like that again. For me, right, the very first time that I heard Derrick call me dad, it was as though God spoke to me, and I turned around so fast before he even really can get it all the way out.
How does it feel to say dad?
At first, it felt awkward. Like, I don't know, it felt awkward. Because I ain't never said it. I had no reason to. So when I say it, I catch myself, and I be like, oh, shit.
After about 3 days after he was here, I went up to his cell, and I said, Derrick, come out. We was on the tier. I said, come out. And he came out of the cell, and I said, your dad a kiss right here. And he kissed me on the cheek. I about ready to fly off the fifth tier. I was ready to just, yeah. When he showed up here, that was like one of the things I had like on my calendar. Like, man, when is his birthday? So I made sure everything was all in place. Let me make sure I get this package right and make sure I get all this stuff right. So when it's his birthday, I'm gonna go make him something, because he had never really tasted my cooking.
Came up there, told me happy birthday, hugged me and kissed me, and then told me he was getting ready to cook. And I ain't never ate his cooking.
So what did he make for you on your birthday?
It was a rice bowl, but it had seafood. It had all different type of stuff and different type of vegetables and everything. Yeah, it was, I don't even eat vegetables. Yeah, but I ate them.
So I'm strolling, I'm coming down the back of the building. So the back of the building, I got to turn and go upstairs. So I'm rolling. I see Big Derrick and Little Derrick in the shower. They side by side, right? I'm like, that's you like 20 years ago.
Yeah. Oh,
You looking at
muscles gone. I know, I was looking at him too. That's crazy.
Yeah, because that wouldn't happen in too many places.
No, that wouldn't happen to me when you just sitting there showering with your son. Y'all just, cutting it, and they just.
And even that was awkward, man. You know that? But I had to force myself through it. Like, man, like, this is the reality, man. Like, man, I'm next. Like, where do they do this at? I watch him walk up the stairs sometimes, right? I'm walking behind. He always going faster than me. And I watch him go up. And I remember how how I used to walk. And so when I watch him walk up the stairs, sometimes I'm like just staring at him like, man, look at me. That is me. And sometimes it is so overwhelming because nobody wants prison for their child. And so it makes me more protective. You know, now I'm more like, okay, where he at? And I'll see him, but I don't let him see me. That brings up a whole nother thing. But yeah, just watching him, watching his mannerisms, how he interacts with people on the tier, how he interacts with people in the prison, very outgoing. And I tell him this all the time. I say, you just the functioning extrovert, because really you're an introvert like me. You really want to be by yourself. You really do good by yourself, but because we're outgoing people, people talk to us and like us. And so I see that in him. But he has no problem being by himself.
We basically do everything just alike. When I get mad, I don't be bothered. I go outside at night and I just be walking. And one night I was just walking like, what the hell is you doing out here? He was like, man, I didn't feel like being bothered. And then we both ended up just being out there walking. And then we always just run into each other out there like, man.
I am nervous every time the alarm goes off. I am like, where is he? Is he involved? Is there a fight? And so for me, it is an anxious day every day. Now I know what my parents went through. Wow, I'm serious. You reap what you sow, I'm telling you.
So we last heard from you in season 1 when we were talking about the Boom Boom Room.
Oh, yes. The Mission Impossible conception of my son.
That's Maverick. In season 1, he told us how him and his wife decided to start a family while he was in prison. Here's a clip from that episode.
I had been at this prison for 2 years, and we had mastered the art of being intimate on the patio. It got us to talking, and she was like, I wish I could have a kid right now. And that got me to thinking. I'm like, oh man, this is the only thing that you can give her. You should go ahead and give her this. I would only get a visit like maybe once.
How old is he now?
He is 15 years old.
So he's a teenager.
Man, tell me about it.
Maverick's been in prison for his son's entire life.
But they have visits and phone calls.
And letters.
Yep.
That's what you got to work with if you want to be an active parent from prison.
And starting about a year ago, Maverick began having family visits. And that's one of the biggest privileges here.
It's huge. That's when your wife and your kids,
or it can be your parents and siblings, come to stay with you for a few days in a cottage here.
And we asked Maverick to tell us about the latest family visit he had with his wife and his son.
I cut his hair for the first time, and that's like a rite of passage for every father to cut his son's hair at some point in time. And he was scared at first because the whole month before the visit, I told him, you better not get your hair cut. Don't get your hair cut. I'm gonna cut your hair. And he's like, oh, all right. He was skeptical. And then I brought my clippers out, and when it came time to do it, I'm like, take off your shirt. And he's embarrassed because, he's a little big fella for his age. And he was like, oh, and it was so funny. I'm like, boy, if you don't stop, I am your daddy. I gave you that, It ain't no judgment. I ain't never gonna judge you. You are about to go to one of the most horriblest, cruelest places on the planet. High school. And people gonna be making fun of your body. If you are embarrassed of your body, then kids are gonna use that against you. So you gotta be comfortable in the skin you in. So just get comfortable. After I cut his hair, he went to look at it and he was like, oh my oh my goodness, Papa, this is great. You know, I got to pay $40 to get this haircut. And I was like, yeah, boy, you're going to be able to get that every day when I come home. And it just gave me a glimpse of how thirsty he is to have a father in his life. But I believe that unsurety of exactly when I was going to come home, it was occupying too much of his mind. I got him worrying about me in here, so much where he can't focus in class. And that's what hurts me the most. Me not being able to help him process this. Me not being able to be there to just be there, to help him, to hold him, to let him know, look, it's going to be all right.
It's been a long struggle, but the good news is his son might have his dad home soon. Maverick has a date, which means he could be released on parole sometime this year.
Thanks for coming back. I know this isn't an easy one. So what we wanted to talk about was what happened with your son.
Yeah, so I actually got a call at work and said that they were ready to transfer Derrick, and they were like transpacking him right now. So I needed to get there right away. Went back to the building, so his door is open, and I see a lot of boxes out in the front and some of his tubs, and you know, and it really began to sink in that he was getting ready to leave, and I had all these emotions going on, like, could I have said something else? You know, what else could I have done? Should I have moved him in? You know, should I have been there a little bit more, kind of like fending off some of these bad people? I had all these emotions going, all these thoughts, all these feelings.
The reason Derrick Jr. was transferred out of San Quentin is because he got in trouble for contraband.
And it was happening fast. So Derrick Sr. went to go see him one last time.
Did he say anything to you?
Yeah, he just kind of looked, and I read his thoughts kind of. I looked in his eyes, and it was like, you know, Dad, I don't really want to leave, but I know I have to at this point, and they're waiting on me in R&R right now. I said, yeah, I know. I said, well, I'm going to help you carry your stuff down. And then when he comes out to actually leave, he has on his blue uniform, as I like to call it. And he had his hair up in you know, because he has his long hair, so he's got it up with these dreads. He's got it up in a ponytail, and I'm looking at him. We're standing at the end at the top of the stairs, and he hugs me, and he's like, Dad, I love you. And man, he shoots down the stairs so fast, I'm trying to keep up when I realize how young. So he goes out the door, and I'm following him. I'm like, I'm going to walk down there with you. And he's walking down, and I remember studying everything about him. I actually walked behind him just to look at him. And I'm studying his body motion, his footsteps, and everything. Yeah.
Where did he go?
To Vacaville.
Which is a level 3?
Which is a level 3.
What's your biggest fear for him now?
That he won't make it out.
So as we said, Derrick Jr. came in with a 5-year sentence, but Derrick Sr.'s fear is that it could turn into a much longer sentence. I know you've said you've seen this happen to guys.
Yeah, I've seen a guy that came in with a car theft and committed murder in prison, and he's been here 46 years.
Right, he's still at San Quentin.
Still here.
So that's one big concern for Derrick Sr. The other is he's lost daily contact with his son.
He told us he's waiting to get permission to exchange letters with him, but yeah, it's a blow.
The closeness that he achieved for the first time with his son isn't going to be easy to maintain.
It's not just that Derrick Sr. is in prison, which is hard enough. His son's now in a different prison in a different part of the state. It's now like they have 2 thick layers of glass between them.
When we come back, we're going to have count time. That's when we play a little something extra, a song, an anecdote, basically something we really want you to hear.
This time we're going to hear from John again. He's going to answer a question from a listener.
Count time! Woods. 5-4. Morris. Lonnie. Rice. 8-7.
Erlon, you know we get a lot of letters, right?
Right.
So many so that when we are deep into production, it's really hard for me to keep up with them. So I put them in a box so I can get to them shortly. But while we were working on this episode, I happened to pull one randomly out of that box, and I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, we get letters from all over, asking all kinds of stuff. But when we got this one, we thought we'd ask John to handle it.
Okay, this is a letter, it looks like from a youngster named Jalen. It says, "My name is Jalen. My dad is in prison. I'm nine and a half years old. I really like listening to your podcast. My dad does not write me a lot now. Can I get him to write me more? Please write back. Thanks, Jalen. P.S. Can you share this or one of your podcasts, please?"
So reading that, like, what do you get? Like, what is your advice to him?
Oh, man, I've got tears in my eyes and something in my throat right now. Jalen, if you're listening in now, my heart goes out to you, little one. I don't know what is in your dad's heart. Wherever he is in this system, there are a lot of pressures on him. Please don't stop. Please. Your letter says that he does not write to you a lot, so that's telling me that he does write you some. So the caring is there. Dig deep into that little heart and soul of yours and try to find the best words you can to let your dad know how important staying in contact with him is to you, how much you love the letters that you do get, how much you get out of them. And I bet you your letters are going to make him understand how important whatever he has to say is in your life. What a great letter, Jalen. Keep it up. Please, please.
Jalen, we really appreciate you sending that letter.
And I hope you heard your name in that Christmas song, Jalen.
Hey, did you get everybody? Everybody. Got all of us.
Thanks to all the fathers we spoke to for this episode, Derrick, John, and Maverick, and thanks to Derrick Jr., too, for being part of the story.
Ear Hustle is produced by myself, Erlon Woods, and Nigel Poor, with help from outside producer Pat Mesiti-Miller, who also works with the sound design team. This episode was scored with music and sound design by David Jazzy and Antoine Williams, with contributions from Lee Jaspar, Maserati E, and Charlie Spencer.
Curtis Fox is our story editor, and Julie Shapiro is our executive producer for Radiotopia. We also want to thank Warden Ron Davis, and as you know, every episode has to be approved by this guy here.
I'm Lieutenant Sam Robinson, the Public Information Officer at San Quentin State Prison, and I approve this story.
Next time on Ear Hustle,
we're going to be answering some of your questions.
Because you know I tell you every time I go to the post office, that P.O. box is full of postcards.
Right.
And there's no way we can answer all of them, but we've got a great selection that we're going to choose from, like this postcard right here.
This is a good one from Brooklyn, New York. It says, you're going to have to wait till next time to hear it.
Teaser.
Check out our website, earhustlesq.com, where you can download transcripts of all our stories as well as see photos from people from our stories.
And check out our listener photographs and some of the cool kites we've received. And also, remember, you can see us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at earhustlesq.
And thanks for leaving all those great reviews on iTunes. Nige comes in and shares them all with us, and it's really cool to know what you're thinking.
Keep them coming.
Please do. I'm Earlonne Woods.
And I'm Nigel Poor. Thanks for listening.
People was like, man, he could hoop. I'd be like, man, that fat boy can't hoop. Then one morning, they was like, man, your dad out there serving right now. I was about to play against him till everybody start coming. I'm like, all right, we gonna play on the same team. It shocked me. I'd be like, oh, he really could get down. You would never think he could hoop, though.
Radiotopia.